Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all of you and the World Economic Forum, I'm delighted to welcome an extraordinary person to our annual meeting. As you know, the Forum is an institution that believes that multi-stakeholder dialogue is a prerequisite for action. I'm told, Mr. Prime Minister, I am told by your business community that you are short on words but long on action. You are previously the Minister of ICT of Egypt, and you are now Prime Minister of your country since barely 6 months. And you have surrounded yourself with young and action-oriented ministers who hold the key portfolios of economy, of trade, of finance, and energy. And this dream team is here with us in Davos, along with yourself. Within a few weeks only of taking office, you implemented a complete reform of your customs, something that previous governments had been unable to do for many years. You have been standardizing custom procedures. You are now proposing a new and complete overhaul of your fiscal system. You have supported the creation of new political parties in your country, and you believe in establishing a proper free trade area in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Prime Minister Nazif, the youngest minister in Egypt, Prime Minister in Egypt's history.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to address you today as we witness profound changes that are taking place in the Middle East and strive to influence events and shape reform in order to achieve peace and prosperity for our people. The future of our region has been subject of debate over the past few years, raising more questions than answers about economic, social, cultural, and political issues that face our nations as they set their development plans and interact with the changing global environment. There has been several attempts at introducing frameworks for development that address economic and social progress, as well as issues of governance and democracy. Many nations, like Egypt, have already embarked on executing reform programs that introduce profound structural changes at an accelerated pace. Ladies and gentlemen, when we describe change as inevitable, we are faced with two choices: either to let it happen or to make it happen. We, as responsible governments of leading nations in the region, choose to control our own destiny by setting the winds of change at our own pace and to our own benefit. A planned approach to setting reform must be motivated by goals that satisfy the basic needs of our societies. These include an integration into the world economy that preserves our cultural identity, yet allows for the further flow of know-how and capital, as well as goods and services. Our needs also include bridging the ever-expanding gap with the developed world by building public and private partnerships that establish common grounds on the social, economic, and political levels. We need to utilize our combined resources to generate wealth within the region, with a particular focus on job creation, raising the standard of living, and adding value to our economies. We need to increase the participation of society as a whole, and in particular our younger generations, in the management of our destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on creating a framework for realizing those goals, we must take note of the challenges that confront us. First, not all countries of the region are at the same level of development, nor do they all suffer from the same deficiencies. This suggests that there is no standard recipe or a ready-made solution that can be applied across nations. Second, as we take actions to reform our economies, we must protect the interests of the poor by maintaining an adequate social umbrella. Third, there is a need to balance the pace of economic, social, and political reforms so that they can work together to achieve steady progress towards our goals. Having said that there is no one-size-fits-all reform formula, let me point out some basic development strategies that reflect our vision for reform. On economic issues, there is a need to create a business environment that encourages trade and investment with a strong regional focus, yet in a more global context. Some recommended actions include increasing confidence in our investment climate by enhancing transparency and providing stable and consistent regulations, eliminating administrative barriers and reducing financial burdens on investments caused by excessive taxation, providing quality services to investors, including incentives that encourage technology and know-how transfers, supporting public-private partnerships that encourage investors to participate in updating production and service facilities, utilizing our natural and human resources in sectors where we maintain a competitive advantage, such as tourism, agriculture, energy, and information technology. Investments and business partnerships create jobs and alleviate poverty, two main ingredients for a successful reform process. On the social front, developing key areas such as education and health services, especially those that serve the underprivileged, is a crucial factor for success. The reform of our education system should aim at preparing our young generations to become competitive in a global environment, yet encourage them to preserve their heritage and cultural identity while accepting the cultural diversity that enriches our world. Our programs must cater for the needs of the poor by providing essential goods and basic services at affordable prices through an efficient and dynamic subsidy system, while encouraging them to build their own capacity and to become self-dependent. In addition to the economic and social issues, a comprehensive reform program must develop the political and legislative environment that deepens democracy and achieves proper governance. A central issue in deepening democratic activity is expanding political participations by encouraging all citizens, and especially the young ones and women, to participate in elections, and by raising public awareness regarding the importance of political participation. The development of an efficient judiciary system helps in imposing the rule of law and guarantees citizens' rights while introducing more discipline and order in our societies. Special attention must be given to gender issues by reinforcing and enhancing the role of women in society, fighting discrimination against women, and providing them with better opportunities to improve their social and economic standing, as well as their political participation. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of our region is very much linked to the settlement of disputes that have hindered our progress for more than half a century. We must support the right of people to control their own destiny and live in peace. Palestinians and Israelis must assume the responsibilities to achieve peaceful coexistence. We must encourage the Iraqi people to participate fully in shaping their future and managing their own affairs. Finally, no nation and no region can develop without building proper ties with the global community. Bilateral, regional, and international relations with more advanced nations provide opportunities for supporting reform in developing countries. There is no special mold that can be applied to a nation to shape its future. But there is, however, an enormous amount of accumulated knowledge and experience that can benefit those who aspire for a better future. As we open our markets for international trade, we must also open our minds for a better understanding of our strengths and our limitations as we cross cultural boundaries and attempt to achieve win-win relationships. Thank you.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. We have the great pleasure that you're going to be participating in the panel that starts in 3-4 minutes on the issue of modernization without westernization. But maybe just before asking Jim Clancy and the fellow panelists to join us on the stage, I'd just like to come back to the one issue that you mentioned on the no one size fits all. You mentioned that there's no automatic mold that can be applied to any country for its reform process. Yet, on the other hand, you also have mentioned in your speech that there's a need to integrate and reach out to the global community. When you talk about issues like transparency and harnessing human resources, that entails, for example, educational reform, transparency, good governance entails a whole number of other reforms, political participation you mentioned in your speech as well. You can't, on the other hand, for countries, the demands of globalization are such that they can't always adapt the pace of their reforms to a comfortable pace. So we have, for example, we heard from President Obasanjo this morning, the NEPAD in Africa, with peer review mechanisms whereby panels are coming into countries and independent panels are trying to make an independent assessment on some of these thorny issues. Now, the Arab world has its own set of issues with these notions of transparency and educational reform. Do you think that this NEPAD model is something that could be applied to the Arab world?
Yeah, I believe it is. I think that we need more peer reviews in the Arab world. We need to interact more with each other. I think it would be easier for the transfer of new ideas and their acceptance as well. Because when you address reform, you're addressing many audiences. You're addressing the global community, but you're also addressing your own people. And for example, when you take any subject, take the education reform, for example. If your own people feel that it is sort of an imposed solution, something coming from abroad, something coming to influence it, because the sensitivity of cultural heritage and cultural preservation might come as an issue in this case. But when it comes from a group of nations that look at education and say, hey, this is what we can do there, and then modernization, get the technology in for education, for example, that will help. But let the content side be done locally as much as possible, or regionally for that matter. So I think there is always a delicate balance that we need to keep between the focus of what comes from inside, from within, and then the sense of ownership is more in the process, and what comes from abroad and is seen as an imposition in some way or another. What comes from abroad should be seen as transfer of knowledge, transfer of know-how, rather than being a given solution to a certain problem.
Prime Minister, thank you. I think that in the very short moment and in the next hour, all of you here are going to be convinced that in Egypt, there is under this Prime Minister a just do it attitude. And if the winds of change are going to blow through Egypt, then the Middle East has a very hopeful future. So thank you very much for joining us, and please stay as Jim Clancy joins us. Thank you.